The message came without sound, without emotion, just cold text, drifting across the void of space in every known language to the humans of Earth. You are to remain within your solar system. Do not cross into the territory of the Galactic Empire. This is your first and final warning. It came from nowhere. No ship, no ambassador. Just signal. Precise, calm, final. On Luna Station, high above Earth's moon. The message repeated again and again on the main screen in the United Earth Command chamber. Everyone inside the room stared in silence. Military officers, scientists, diplomats, they all read the message with a growing sense of tension. Captain Ross sat quietly in the back. His uniform was old, the patches faded from years of service. He had fought pirates in the Belt, rebels, on Europa, and alien raiders beyond Pluto. He was not impressed by empty threats. The council spoke in turns. Some wanted peace. Some said Earth should respect the message. After all, they didn't know how powerful the Galactic Empire was. Others, especially those from Mars colonies and Saturn outposts, argued the opposite. Earth had worked too hard to stop now. They had just begun to explore the stars. General Yu, a man of careful words, stood and adjusted his coat. We should investigate, but with caution. We don't want to provoke something we don't understand. Then came the voice from the corner. Ross stood up slowly, eyes calm but sharp. We never signed any treaty with them, he said. They don't rule us. We are not some frightened species hiding behind borders. If they didn't want us to come, maybe they're afraid of what happens when we do. The room went quiet. Ambassador Hale narrowed his eyes. Captain Ross, are you suggesting we respond with force? Ross shook his head. I'm suggesting we respond by showing them we don't. Scare easy. The silence broke into murmurs. Ross continued, stepping forward. If this empire is so powerful, why send only a message? Why not come in person? Why hide behind a signal? We've come too far to stop now. We built engines that can bend space. We turned Mars into a garden. We tame fusion. We are not children. A young diplomat asked from the side. What if we go and they attack us? Ross looked at her and answered, then we fight. And we'll show them what humanity really is. The room was divided, but Ross had sparked something. A fire that spread through the ranks of the fleet, through the halls of leadership, and into the hearts of the people. Within 2 weeks, the plan was set. Humanity had long been preparing for deep space exploration. The ships were ready, powerful, armed, and crewed by those who had survived the hardest missions Earth ever launched. The first expeditionary fleet was born, 10 ships strong, each one armed with railguns, drone swarms, and shield generators. Not meant for war, but ready for it. The flagship was TNS Resolute, and Ross was given command. By his side stood Admiral Vera, a strict, sharp-minded officer who once defeated a fleet of smugglers in the Kuiper Belt using only 3 ships and a trap. She didn't smile often, but she respected results. As the fleet moved toward the edge of the solar system, Earth watched. Billions tuned in as the ships disappeared into fold space. No one knew what waited on the other side. They arrived near a star called Kepler 92, outside the known human maps. It was a cold blue sun with a single rocky planet, the perfect place for a forward base. The fleet dropped orbit. Drones began scanning the surface. Engineers prepared to land. That's when the second message arrived. It was not in words. It was a sound, low, rumbling, strange. The AI translated it slowly. You ignored the warning. Turn back. This is your final chance. Ross stood on the bridge of the Resolute and looked at the screen. Record this, he said. The comms officer nodded. Ross faced the camera and spoke with a calm voice. This is Captain Ross of the Terran Fleet. We don't turn back. We explore. We build. We help those in need. If you attack us, we will defend ourselves. If you welcome us, we will come in peace. But we will not be ordered. Not by anyone. He ended the message and ordered it sent across the region. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then they came. The alien ships appeared from fold space, black, thin, shaped like spears. They moved without sound, scanning the human fleet from a distance. Ross and Vera stood on the command deck, watching the signals approach. They're not attacking, Vera said. But they're watching us. Testing. Good, Ross replied. Let them watch. Engineers completed landing modules. Humans stepped onto Kepler-9 to see surface, planted Terran flags, and began construction of the base. Solar towers rose, communication arrays hummed, machines buzzed. The alien ships stayed in orbit, circling like vultures. One night, during the quiet shift, something strange was discovered. A signal from the planet buried beneath the soil. A pod. It was old, covered in strange markings. The science team opened it slowly. Inside, they found a small creature, humanoid, eyes large and glowing faintly. It was weak but alive. Ross was called to the site. The creature whispered in a language they didn't know, but fear was clear in its voice. The translator tried its best. Are you here to help? It said slowly. Ross looked down at the creature, then at the alien ships still orbiting above. Yes, he said. We are. The message went out. Across nearby systems, through hidden channels, past locked frequencies, the humans came. And they did not kneel. Captain Ross stood on the bridge of the TNS Resolute, staring at the screen in front of him. The alien ship still floated above. The planet, silent, watching, waiting. Behind him, the crew worked quietly. No one spoke much. The presence of those black spear-like ships created tension in the air, like a storm waiting to break. But no one in the fleet showed fear. They had come here with purpose. The forward base on Kepler-9 to see was growing fast. Machines worked day and night, building structures, setting up defense systems, and deploying communication towers. Human engineers, soldiers, and scientists walked across the dusty surface in armored suits. On the 10th day, a new message was sent. It came directly to the Resolute. It wasn't from the orbiting ships. It came from deeper in space. This time, it was spoken. Deep, slow voice echoed across the ship's speakers. You were warned. Your kind does not belong beyond your sun. Return or be erased. Ross didn't flinch. He looked toward the comms officer. Send our reply. The officer nodded and tapped the console. Ross stepped forward and spoke calmly. This is Captain Ross of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We are peaceful, but not weak. If you attack, we will defend ourselves. We do not seek war, but we are not going home. The message ended. Moments later, the alien ships above the planet turned slowly and vanished into fold space. They're going to report, Vera said, standing beside Ross. This is not over. No, Ross replied. It's just beginning. The United Earth Command received the updates in real time. They saw the alien ships. They heard the voice. They watched as the humans stood their ground, back on Earth. The message spread fast. Humanity holds its ground beyond the stars. On Mars, children waved handmade Terran flags. On space stations around Jupiter, miners raised toasts in honor of the fleet. The people were proud, and they were watching. The fleet moved forward. Ross, Vera, and the other captains decided to begin exploring nearby systems. They sent scouts to a moon around Kepler-93. There, they found ruined structures not made by humans, ancient stone, massive in size, carved with symbols. Dr. Helen, the fleet's lead archaeologist, examined them closely. These are not Empire-made, she said. They are older, much older. Someone was here long before. But the team wasn't alone. At night, their drones caught moving tall shadows watching from the trees. One was captured and brought aboard the science vessel. It was humanoid, thin and tall, with gray skin and long fingers. It didn't resist. When it was given food, it ate slowly and stared at the crew with tired eyes. Ross visited the lab the next morning. Can it speak? He asked. Dr. Helen nodded. It understands basic words. It's trying to communicate. The alien raised its hand and pointed to a symbol drawn on a screen. It looked like a spiral with a line through it. What does that mean? Ross asked. The translator buzzed. Danger. Slavers. Ross leaned forward. The Empire? The alien nodded slowly. As the humans moved deeper, they began to understand the truth. The Galactic Empire was not just a government. It was a system of control. Power built over thousands of years. Planets were ruled with fear. Entire species were forced into labor. Some were wiped out. And now, they feared something new. Something they couldn't control. Humans. The First Fleet continued to move. They built new outposts, shared food and supplies with locals, released prisoners from hidden camps. Each time, more whispers spread through the stars. The humans came. They don't take slaves. They don't run. They fight. Soon, messages started arriving from nearby systems, not from the Empire but from those living under it. One came from a mining colony called 04, a broken signal, a voice filled with static and fear. Help, they punish us for speaking. But we heard of you. Please. Ross and Vera listened to the message in silence. She turned to him. We're not just explorers anymore. Ross nodded. No, we're something else. Now, they set course for 04. 04 was a rocky world, dry and lifeless. The Empire had turned it into a mining station. Thousands of workers, mostly from insectoid species, were forced to dig tunnels for rare crystals. The fleet arrived in orbit without warning. The Empire had left only to patrol ships. They tried to block the Terrans, but were outnumbered and outgunned. Within minutes, they surrendered. Ross landed on the surface with a full ground team. They marched into the mines and found creatures barely alive, thin, beaten, scared. One of them crawled forward, antenna twitching. Are you from Earth? It asked in a shaky voice. Ross knelt and placed a food pack in its hands. Yes, he said. And you're free now. Tears streamed from the alien's large black eyes. Admiral Vera called for a fleet-wide meeting after the rescue. We've done more than just survive here, she said. We've sent a message the Empire cannot ignore. We protect. We don't enslave. We don't run. Ross stood beside her and looked at the captains. We didn't come to start a war, he said. But if war comes, we won't be the ones who fall. Across the fleet, the crew listened in silence. Then, one by one, they stood and saluted. The path forward was clear. Humanity would not stop. The First Fleet would move deeper into Empire space. They would find allies. They would free the broken. They would answer the warnings not with fear, but with fire. And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy began to hope. Captain Ross stood at the window of the TNS Resolute, watching the stars slowly drift past. His mind was calm, but the tension in the air had grown heavier over the last few days. The rescue at 04 had changed everything. Now, the Terran fleet wasn't just exploring. It was becoming a threat to the Galactic Empire's control. News of what the humans had done was spreading, and the Empire was preparing to respond. Ships had gone dark near the Kepler systems. Trade routes had been closed. Empire patrols vanished. The quiet in space was louder than any warning. Admiral Vera entered the command deck. She held a data pad in her hand. They're coming, she said. Ross turned to her. Empire ships? He asked. She nodded. 6 of them, old models, but heavily armed. Scanners picked them up near Kepler 90 to see. They're coming straight toward our position. Ross gave a slow nod. Then it begins. The fleet had already moved to a defensive position near a gas giant called Tovar. It had large rings to small moons and enough cover to hide their weaker ships. Ross ordered the support vessels to hold near the moon Elian while the main force took position above the planet. He stood in front of the holo map and gave the plan to his crew. We will not fire first, Ross said. But if they open fire, we strike back with everything. Understood, Captain, said Commander Malik, head of the ship's weapons team. The crew went to their stations. Drones launched from bays, spreading into defensive patterns. Fighters stood ready in formation. Railguns charged. The air inside the ship buzzed with energy. Hours later, the Empire fleet arrived. They came through fold space in perfect formation. Their ships were long and silver, marked with the symbol of the High Council. Red lights blinked along their hulls like eyes. The lead ship hailed the Resolute. Ross allowed the message. The screen lit up with the image of a tall alien with pale skin and sharp eyes. His voice was slow and cold. I am Commander Trell of the Empire. You were warned. You ignored that warning. You aided criminals. You stepped beyond your place. Ross stood straight and replied without hesitation. We helped the weak. We defended those who asked for help. That is not a crime. Trell narrowed his eyes. Turn back. Destroy your stations. Surrender your ships. You have 1 hour. The screen went black. Silence filled the command deck. Ross turned to his crew. We hold the line. Exactly 1 hour later, the Empire ships. Fire. Green beams sliced through the darkness of space. Aimed directly at the human support vessels near Elian, Ross gave the command. All units, engage. The battle had begun. Explosions lit up the sky. Terran railguns returned fire with precision. Drones moved like angry hornets, striking weak points on the enemy hulls. Empire fighters clashed with Terran interceptors in fast and brutal attacks. 1. Empire ship broke formation and charged toward the Resolute. Ross stayed calm. Lock railguns. Wait for my mark. The enemy ship kept coming, weapons glowing hot. Closer, Ross said. The ship closed in, fast and aggressive. Fire. Twin railguns fired from the Resolute. The shot tore through the enemy ship's center. It spun in silence before exploding in a bright flash. The crew cheered. But the fight was far from over. Admiral Vera was on the bridge of the TNS Valor, coordinating fleet movements. Her voice was sharp and clear. Enemy flanking left. Redirect to cruisers. Keep formation tight. She moved like a storm. Calm on the outside. Fire underneath. On the surface of Elian, defense teams activated anti-air systems. Empire dropships had tried to land, but human turrets shot them down before they reached the ground. Meanwhile, the civilians rescued from 04 watched the battle from a shelter dome. They couldn't speak, but their eyes were full of hope. They had never seen anyone fight the Empire and went out until now, back in space. Ross noticed something strange. One of the Empire ships wasn't firing. It hovered near the edge of the fight, its shields active, but weapons silent. Ross focused on the readings. That ship's energy was low. Its engine core was unstable. Open a private channel, Ross said. The ship responded. A tired voice answered. We are not loyal to the Empire. They took our home, forced us to serve. Ross leaned forward. Then stop fighting. Power down your ship. We'll protect you. The ship's weapons went offline. A moment later, it turned and flew away from the battle. Ross smiled. We're not just fighting. We're showing them a different way. The Empire fleet realized they were losing. 2 more ships were disabled. 1 retreated. The last 2 fired wildly before they were surrounded and forced to surrender. The battle was over. Humanity had won. On the deck of the Resolute, the crew stood in silence, looking at the wreckage floating across the stars. Ross turned to the communications officer. Send the message to all nearby systems. Yes, Captain. What message? Ross paused, then said clearly, Terran fleet stance. We do not run. We do not fear. We help those in need. The Empire has no power here. The message went out, not just to Empire systems, but to hidden worlds, broken colonies, and lost peoples. And on those worlds, creatures of all shapes and forms heard a message they never expected. The humans came, and they didn't kneel. Captain Ross stepped into the medical bay of the TNS Resolute. Inside, several alien beings sat quietly, wrapped in thermal blankets. They had just been rescued from the Empire ship that surrendered during the battle. One of them, a young insectoid with soft green wings, looked up at Ross with wide, curious eyes. Her body was thin, her arms marked with old wounds. Are you the leader? She asked slowly. Using the ship's translator, Ross nodded. Yes, I'm Captain Ross. You're safe now. The insectoid looked down at her hands and whispered, We didn't believe the stories were true. Not until today. Word of the human victory at Kepler spread like wildfire. In every corner of the Empire's edge, those who had once whispered in the dark now spoke openly. On a distant jungle world called Jork, a reptilian species known as the Drows gathered in hidden caves. 2 listened to a smuggler's recording of the Terran message, Terran fleet stance. We do not run. We help those in need. An elder Drows placed his hand on the rock wall. Perhaps our children may see freedom before their last breath. On the mining colony of Vela, where insectoid workers lived underground, someone managed to steal a copy of the battle footage. They projected it on a wall inside a dark tunnel. Dozens watched as human ships defended a helpless planet. A young worker looked up at the stars through a cracked ceiling. Maybe someone finally came for us. Ross sat with Admiral Vera and the other ship captains inside the Resolute's war room. A large galactic map glowed on the table. Several dots blinked red Empire control zones. But now, a few blinked yellow, showing possible rebel activity. We've received messages from 5 different systems, Vera said, all asking for help. Some are ready to resist, others are begging for food, medicine, or evacuation. Commander. Malik leaned forward. We can't help them all at once. No, Ross said, but we don't need to. We just need to give them hope. That's enough to light the fire. The captains agreed. They picked the next target. New Garen, a farming world deep in Empire territory, small, forgotten by most, but rich in crops. Empire forces there were thin, mostly local enforcers and a few drones. It was time for the fleet to move again. When the humans arrived in orbit above New Garen, there was no welcome, no defenses either. The planet had suffered under high taxes. Enforced food shipments, most of the crops were sent to Empire cities. The people lived on scraps. Ross led a team down with food, water, and medical supplies. They were met by silence at first. Farmers stared from their huts, unsure if the visitors were more conquerors. An elder stepped forward. His skin was blue, his eyes dull. He looked at the food crates and then at Ross. Why would you bring us this? Because no one else did. Ross replied. The elder knelt and touched the crates gently. Then he looked up and said, We stand. That moment was recorded by the fleet's media drones. The image of the elder, eyes full of tears, holding a bag of Terran food, was broadcast across the region. It became a symbol. Ross didn't plan it. He wasn't interested in fame, but he understood one thing clearly: hope was the strongest weapon. They had Vera joined him in the field as they helped build new shelters. We've become more than a fleet, she said. We're becoming something they believe in. Ross looked at the sky above. Then we need to live up to that belief. Not long after, the Empire reacted. They sent a warning from their inner systems. This time, not just a message, but a broadcast. The screen turned black. Then the image of a high-ranking Empire officer appeared. His eyes were silver. His voice was smooth and full of pride. You have interfered with internal matters. You have broken boundaries that do not belong to you. The next step will not be a warning. It will be destruction. Ross watched the message silently. Then he turned to the comms officer. Send our answer. The officer nodded. Ross looked into the camera. We are not conquerors. We are not invaders. We are defenders of the forgotten. Your threats mean nothing to us. If you want to stop us, you'll have to come yourself. The message ended. Within days, the human fleet received another visitor. But this time, it wasn't from the Empire. A small group of ships appeared near New Garen's orbit. Their design was strange wide wings, glowing patterns along the side. They did not attack. Instead, they sent a signal. Ross and Vera gathered on the bridge as the message was played. A voice, calm and aged, spoke. We are the Kiranai, watchers from the broken stars. We have hidden for many years, but we heard your call. We see your fight. If you accept us, we will help. Ross smiled. Patch them through. The Kiranai ships docked with the Resolute peacefully. They brought new information maps of Empire, trade routes, weak points, and communication towers. In a list of planets where the Empire stored weapons, they also brought stories. Stories of how the Empire once crushed a peaceful alliance of worlds, destroyed knowledge, and erased entire species. Ross sat with their leader, an old being with skin like crystal. Why help us now? Ross asked. The Kiranai elder replied. Because you are the first not to ask for permission. You simply stood. Others will follow. Soon after, the Terran fleet grew. More ships came: rebels, traders, free miners. Some had no weapons but wanted to help with supplies. Others offered old warships, barely working but still strong. The fleet had become something else now. Not just human, a union of the broken, the free, and the brave. A fire was rising in the dark corners of the galaxy. And at the center of it stood the humans, unafraid, unbowed, and unbroken. The sky above New Garen was quiet to quiet. Captain Ross stood on the surface beside Admiral Vera, looking up at the stars. They had helped rebuild the farms, treated the sick, and trained the people to defend themselves. Hope was returning to the planet, but Ross felt something coming, something heavy, like a shadow moving closer. Vera received the report first. Our deep space probes are gone, she said, reading the data. 3 vanished near the fold route. 1 sent a final image before blackout. She showed Ross the image, a large fleet, dozens of ships. Sleek, dark, shaped like arrows. Ross narrowed his eyes. Empire's bringing a hammer. It wasn't long before the full warning came. The Galactic Empire's High Council sent a new message. Not a simple threat this time, a declaration. The screen filled with the image of a tall figure in deep blue armor. His voice was strong, and behind him stood symbols of many conquered worlds. I am High Lord Valtrin. The humans have crossed the line. They have aided rebels. They have touched what does not belong to them. For this, they will be broken. There was no option, no surrender terms. Just one final line. Your story ends now. Ross gathered the leaders inside the main strategy room of TNS Resolute. He looked at the map on the table. The Empire fleet was heading for Nova Zenth, a mid-level colony in the Outer Ring. It was one of the few free systems left with its own defense network. But the Empire wanted to wipe it clean. They're not just trying to punish us, Vera said. They want to scare everyone watching. Make an example of us, Ross nodded. Then we make sure the example they said is one of failure. He pointed to the map. We meet them at Nova Zenth. The Allied fleet jumped to Nova Zenth. It was a world of cities floating on water, surrounded by rich oceans and tall cloud pillars. The people there had chosen to resist the Empire many years ago, but their weapons were old, and their fleet was small. When the Terran fleet arrived, the people of Nova Zenth cheered. Children waved flags from their windows. Lights lit up the sky in celebration. But joy turned to silence as the Empire's fleet arrived. Valtrin's warships came like a black wall. There were 40 in total, heavy carriers, destroyers, and assault cruisers, all armed, all moving as one. Their formation was perfect. Their discipline absolute. Vera stood on the deck, watching the screen. They've trained for war their entire lives. Ross stood beside her. So have we. The battle began. Empire ships opened fire without warning. Energy blasts cut through the darkness. Terran ships responded with railguns, missiles, and drone clouds. Nova Zenth's defense towers activated, but they were too old to hold for long. Ross ordered the Resolute and its twin, the TNS Valor, to cover the planetary shield's Empire. Fighters swarmed like metal insects, crashing into human lines. Terran pilots fought with sharp skill, weaving through enemy waves, protecting the weaker ships. One Terran frigate, the TNS Brightstar, was hit by 3 beams. It spun and exploded in the sky. 20 lives were lost, but before the Empire could push forward, something changed. The Karenai ships appeared from behind a nearby moon. They fired ancient beam weapons in support of the humans, catching the Empire by surprise. A group of small rebel ships joined moments later. Miners, traders, even pirates. Now united under the Terran banner, Valtrin, sitting aboard his command ship, stared at the growing list of ships in the field. His eyes narrowed, indisciplined. Fools, he said. Their numbers mean nothing. He reached out with his mind. A psychic pulse spread across the battlefield. Ships shuddered. Weak minds broke. Some of the rebel ships spun in confusion. A few fled. Others lost control. Ross felt it to a strange pressure in his skull. But he stayed focused. Valtrin's a mind user, Vera said, holding her head. He's trying to crush us with fear. Ross leaned forward, gripping the console. He doesn't know who he's dealing with. On the surface of Nova Zenth, a message was sent through the People's Network. a speech from one of the city leaders. She stood in front of her people and shouted, "We are not alone. We are not broken. The Empire brings fear, but the humans brought fire. If they stand, we stand." Her voice echoed across the towers. Civilians began bringing supplies to defense towers. Mechanics volunteered to help fix damaged turrets. Fighters rose into the sky. The planet had joined the fight. Above, Ross gave a final order. "All units, break formation. Surround them. Hit fast. Hit hard." Terran ships moved like a storm, splitting the Empire fleet, forcing them to spread out. Empire discipline cracked under the chaos. Two enemy destroyers collided during a sudden retreat. One of them exploded. Valtran's command ship tried to escape. Ross targeted it directly. "Focus fire. Bring him down." Missiles, lasers, and drones swarmed his ship. Its shields cracked. Fires broke along the hull. Inside, Valtran stood with smoke rising behind him. He tried one last mental wave, but something blocked it. Ross had activated the Terran Psychic Shield Array, an invention never tested until now. A pulse of silence spread through space, cutting off Valtran's power. He fell to his knees as the command deck shook, and then his ship was struck by the final blast. A massive explosion lit up the sky. The flagship was gone. The Empire fleet broke. Some surrendered. Others ran. The battle was over. Ross stood in silence as the screen showed the retreating ships. His crew looked at him with pride. Exhaustion covered their faces, but they stood strong. Vera walked up beside him. Her uniform was torn, blood on her sleeve, but her eyes were steady. "We did it," Ross nodded. "No," he said. "We showed them it can be done." Messages flooded in from across the stars. On Jorok, the drones lit fires in the night. On Vela, tunnels rang with chants of freedom. In places where hope had long died, it was alive again. The humans had stood, and they had won. But Ross knew it wasn't over. The Empire still ruled many systems. More lords like Valtran would rise. But now the galaxy had seen something new. The Terrans did not kneel, and neither would those who followed them. The victory at Nova Zenth echoed across the galaxy. News of the Terran fleet's strength and courage reached distant worlds, sparking hope in those who had long lived under the Empire's heavy hand. Captain Ross and Admiral Vera stood on the command deck of the TNS Resolute as the fleet prepared for the next move. They faced the heart of the Empire, the home world of Iran Prime. It was a planet of vast cities, glittering towers, and ancient walls. It was the throne world, the place where the Emperor ruled over countless systems. Ross looked at the map glowing before him. "This is where it ends. If we want to change the galaxy, we have to face the source of the problem." Vera nodded. "They will not let us pass quietly. We need every ship and every ally." The fleet grew larger with every system they passed. Ships from freed worlds joined the Terran flag. The drones sent battle cruisers from Jorok, the insectoid. Veil workers brought repair ships. Even smaller human colonies sent fighters and engineers. Ross met with the leaders of these allies in the strategy room. "We fight not for conquest, but for freedom," Ross said. "The Empire uses fear to rule. We will use hope." The leaders agreed. Together, they made plans for the journey to Iran Prime. As they entered the Empire's inner system, the Terran fleet faced heavy resistance. Imperial patrols scanned the borders, sending warnings and threats, but Ross ignored them. The battle for space above Iran Prime was fierce. Empire warships swarmed in formation, their weapons blazing. The Terran fleet responded with unmatched precision, their railguns cutting through the enemy lines. The sky lit up with explosions and beams of energy. Vera commanded the defense of the main fleet while Ross led a small strike team to land on the planet. Their mission was clear: find the Emperor and end the war. The landing site was a massive city built of dark stone and shining metal. It was silent, as if the planet itself held its breath. Ross led the team through narrow streets and towering buildings. Guards appeared, but they were few and hesitant. Word had spread quickly that the Terrans were near. In the shadows, small groups of rebels gathered. They stepped out, joining Ross's team silently. One rebel, a tall woman with silver hair, approached. "I am Lena," she said. "We have waited for this day. The Empire rules with iron, but it cannot hold forever." Ross nodded. "We are here to end it." Deep inside the palace, the Emperor waited. He was old, his face marked by time and power. His eyes were cold and sharp. A message came from his advisors. The humans had landed. He smiled slightly. "Bring me Captain Ross." When Ross entered the throne room, he saw the Emperor sitting on a throne carved from stone and bone. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of energy fields. The Emperor spoke first. "You are strong, Captain. You and your fleet have caused much trouble." Ross answered calmly, "We are not here to destroy. We are here to stop the Empire from destroying more lives." The Emperor stood slowly, strength without. "Control is chaos. You would bring chaos." Ross shook his head. "We bring freedom, freedom to choose, to live, to grow." "That is not chaos." The Emperor nodded, then extended a hand. "Then prove it. Win this battle not with weapons, but with your will." Ross understood. The Emperor's challenge was clear. It was not just a fight of ships and guns. It was a battle of hearts and minds. Back outside, the fleets clashed in space again. The final battle for the Empire's heart was underway. Ross's fleet fought harder than ever. Allies and humans worked together, their trust growing with every passing moment. The Emperor sent wave after wave of ships, but the Terran-led fleet held firm. Inside the throne room, Ross faced the Emperor once more. They fought not with weapons, but with words, ideas, and resolve. Ross spoke of unity and hope. The Emperor spoke of order and control. In the end, Ross's belief in freedom was stronger. The battle ended with the Emperor's defeat. His empire shattered from within as systems declared independence. The galaxy breathed free for the first time. In centuries. Ross returned to the fleet as a new day began. He looked at the stars and smiled. The war was over, but the real work building a galaxy of freedom had just begun. The galaxy was quiet again, but this time the silence was different. It was not the silence of fear or waiting. It was the silence of peace, of hope, of something new. Captain Ross stood on the bridge of the TNS Resolute, looking out at the stars. The Great War was over. The Empire was broken. But now, the real journey began. Behind him, Admiral Vera walked in, carrying a data pad. She smiled softly. "The systems are calling for help," she said. "Rebuilding, repairing, starting again." Ross nodded. "It's time to be builders, not warriors." The fleets that once fought side by side now worked together to heal the galaxy. New governments formed, old enemies talked and made peace. The people of many worlds, once crushed under the Empire's weight, now dreamed of freedom. Ross met with leaders from the allied species in a great council chamber on the floating city of Nova Zenth. "We faced darkness," he said, "and we won, not by might alone, but by standing for what is right." Adro's leader stood and spoke. "Your courage gave us hope. Now we build together." A Kiranai elder added, "This is the start of a new era, one of peace and understanding." But peace did not come easily. The ruins of the Empire's power were deep and tangled. Some systems fought to keep control. Others struggled with new threats, bandits, warlords, and old fears. Ross knew the road ahead was long, but humanity and its allies had learned much. "We face challenges," he told Vera, "but we will face them as one." She smiled. "And we will not forget the fight that brought us here." On the newly freed worlds, humans and aliens worked side by side. Children played in the streets. Markets filled with goods from different planets. Schools taught history, science, and stories of the past wars. Ross visited one such school on Joruk. Youngdro's child raised his hand. "Captain Ross, will there ever be war again?" Ross smiled kindly. "Maybe. But if there is, we will be ready, because we remember, because we stand together." The child nodded, eyes bright. Back aboard the Resolute, Ross stood alone for a moment. He looked at the stars and thought of Earth, of home. The galaxy was wide and full of unknowns. But one thing was certain. Humanity had stepped into the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. They had answered the warning not with fear, but with courage. And they had changed the fate of many worlds forever. As the sun rose over Nova Zenth, a new flag was raised, one that carried the symbols of many species, united, and hoped it was a symbol of a galaxy reborn. And Captain Ross knew this was only the beginning, the end.